I think it would be a good segue into some other questions. And one of our first questions is from one of our incredible Rise parents, Leon, and he asked us, Breb, go for it.
Okay. All right. So the question was one thing we feel that we want to support as parents the most is what are the do's and don'ts of our children's athletic lives in and out of the water? Well, that's a big question. Yeah. Do's and don'ts in and out of the water. And of course, you know, sometimes parents might feel like they want their child to be doing more. They might want them to be focusing on what the parent thinks is important. And I think one of the biggest things, the first place that my mind goes, and Caroline, you can give your thoughts as well, is it's really important to allow your athlete to determine their own road. And we see this a lot as mentors too. It's sometimes I have that urge to jump in and say, no, wait, maybe you should do it that way. Maybe, you know, we should avoid the danger that you're heading towards, not terrible danger. That's when we do step in. But if it's something that it's a learning lesson and they need to you know, find the path in their own way, sometimes it's almost better to sit back and let them do things, let them fall a little bit, let them build a little bit of resilience in that way. Because, you know, I, as a mentor, I had a chance to, when I, you know, was starting to work with athletes a couple years ago, I kept wanting to say, no, don't do that, do it this way. I've learned, I know, I've been through it. But I started to realize I wanted them to experience some of the challenges and give themselves their own chance to step up on their own 2 feet. If we're always holding them up, we're always holding them up, then they stop being able to say, hey, I've got this. I've got what it takes to go through, and realize that, oops, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it that way. Let me see if I can find my own solution. So as far as do's, back to the do's and don'ts, my biggest do is supporting your child, supporting them, helping them to learn the lessons as they go through it, but even allowing them to make a couple of mistakes here and there.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things that I've learned as well is the power of question asking, and asking them questions that are more self-discovery based questions. How does that make you feel? And tell me more. And what did that feel like? You know, so that they can start to then snowball and build upon that one feeling, and then they start to understand the concepts around that. That is a really big do, I think, as well, instead of you know, like Reb said, sometimes I just want to tell them how to do it, or tell them, oh, like, I've been there, let me tell you what I learned. And it's like, well, sometimes it's better to ask questions, and in turn I learn things from their answers. So the power of question asking is really, really great. Yeah,
definitely. I see we have Anthony who joined us from Adelaide, Australia. We're excited. So you're a parent and a coach, and I can imagine that's a little bit of a tricky balance at times, especially if you're coaching your own parenting your own athletes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is tough.
Yeah, and I know one thing that we talk about here and there with Rise is, you know, the triangle of support, or whatever shape you want to put it, of support for this athlete, and how, you know, the mentors get a chance to be a part of that triangle with the parent, with the coach, the mentor, and obviously the athlete at the center. And I think that's an important topic as we're talking about so parents, coach, mentor, athlete.
We got it.
Geography lesson done.
Yes, done.
But yeah, it's great to see how all the different roles play a different position in the athletes' lives. And I think one of the hardest thing, granted we're not parents, but we've talked to our own parents about this and other parents as well, is you know, understanding where the coach's role is to coach and the parent's role is to parents, and you know what that actually means, where the lines cross over, and when we tend to potentially, you know, want the best for our athletes but not really know how to push and motivate them.
Sure. And that brings up a great point as well, Anthony. You know, I've had a couple of athletes whose parents are coaches as well, and I've received the same question, like, when am I, you know, what is too much, or what is enough, or how do I communicate with my daughter that's this age? And not sure what she's going through in her life. How do I help support that? And everything of that nature. And again, it goes back to the power of communication and really getting on the same page with your athlete that, what works for them, what works communication wise, and understanding, okay, as a coach and an athlete, this works. As a parent and an athlete, this works. And having those really open conversations. Not only does that teach them to communicate to you, but it teaches them skills of communication in the future for their teams, with their teammates, with, bigger squads and teams and everything that you're going to be a part of, for sure. It's just a life skill that's really important. So it sounds like that's a cool thing that you guys probably already have going for you.
And with that said, we'd love to open it up to you guys, and we'll watch the comments as we go. But what are some things that you feel like are going right, that is going well, things that ways that you can motivate your athletes that you feel like you're doing a good job? Because I feel like that's a big subject that parents come to us a lot with, is like, I'm trying to motivate them, but they just roll their eyes, or they just are like, Mom, shut up.
Yeah.
Which, they're going to still do, but we'd love to hear some ways that have worked for you. Maybe you've found some of those things that do go right.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear those.
So there'll be a lag time, but you'll see us sitting here smiling. But yeah, so anything that you guys have that you have noticed working with your athletes.
And maybe in the meantime, Caroline, what do you think, what are some things that, I'm just trying to ask questions to ourselves, what are things that we've seen with some of our athletes that show that, they really liked when the parents did this?
Mine have always been, again, just communication, sitting down and wondering. Sometimes my athletes wonder if their parents support different things that they do in their life other than their sport too. And that's that's segueing into one of our other parents asked the question, how do I know what I'm saying or what I'm doing as a parent that didn't compete in a sport? And am I being supportive? And the answer is yes. Just because you may not relate to that specific thing, it's just the athlete just wants to know that you support them and that you love them, period. And I think it's so simple. And that's just something that I've noticed is a recurring theme. They support all my extracurriculars and the fact that I do this and the fact that I do this, even though they may not understand. So I think that's a really cool concept that I've learned.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't know if I had a son that played badminton, it would be very foreign to me because I was a swimmer. However, I know, to support that love and that passion and that interest, and no matter what, they're pursuing something, and that's awesome. So.
Yeah, and Anthony said creativity and flexibility of programming. That's great.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. And so Leon, I know that you and I have discussed before some ways that you've supported Amber and your daughters in their growth and what they've appreciated from your support.
I know. Well, yeah, we will jump back to some of the other comments earlier. Should we talk about any big don'ts?
Yeah.
Big don'ts. Big don'ts. You guys, what are your big don'ts? Things that you don't want, that you realize don't work and you need to avoid doing as parents?
We have a question from Mark. How does your work with the athletes help them and the parents better communicate? Great question.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. I've seen communication in my life has been just an overall theme in so many different ways, and it seems like the better you communicate, the better you are all around. And so the ways that I've seen with my athletes in particular that I work with is helping them understand the details that go into communication. What is it like to not jump into a response when you're a pissed off teenager and just kind of sit and think and listen for a second? trying to appreciate or understand what the other person's intentions are. What are they trying to say? What are their motives? And how can I reply to that instead of just replying out of maybe anger or frustration based on how I immediately felt. So responsiveness is a big one, meaning what's my response? How can I pause for a second before I just jump into this rapid fire breathing response and get into an argument that I wish I could take back later.
That's a great point. Yeah, pausing, taking time to just breathe. And I do that with some of my athletes too, is there's the awkward pauses and the awkward wait for them to say something and speak instead of interjecting and everything like that. And it goes both ways, I think, between mentor, athlete, parent, athlete, coach, athlete, everything, like providing space and time for them to create that feeling, and so that you can communicate properly instead of based on emotion, like Reb said, when you're really upset or frustrated or anything like that. So Maurice, hi Mo. Awesome. But that's a great question, Mark. And I think another thing that we do to help them communicate is something that I think all of the mentors all of the Olympic mentors in Rise, and something that we talk about social media wise and Facebook articles and everything, is the power of writing and journaling. And I think that is a huge part of communication, because then they feel comfortable with those thoughts that they can put on paper. Sometimes that can translate to verbal communication. So I've noticed with a couple of athletes, they've actually asked their coaches, I had them challenge them, but tell their coaches, I just want to write down all the things I'm scared of, because I don't want to say them, because then it becomes real, and then it becomes this thing where I am terrified of, because it's I put it out there. So if they write it down first, then they're able to communicate it in the future a little bit better. So the power of doing both of those.
Yes, love the writing stuff.
Yeah, Reb's good. Reb's the best writer around.
No, it's not about being good. It's just for someone
with it.
like me, who is very in my head and just kept to myself for the past 30 years of my life. And, as an athlete that was very just grind it out and not really, don't pause and think about it, don't get too into the details. Writing came into my life a little bit later, just a couple years ago, and it's just been a massive tool for understanding myself and understanding, you could write a list, like Caroline said, I want to write a list of things that are frustrating me so that I don't have to say them out loud. But not only that, when I sit down to do that, I end up finding 5 new things that are the root of all that stuff, and all of a sudden I feel not as angry or upset, but more curious about, what is this? Where is it coming from? What does it mean? So that's why I'm a huge fan of writing. My actual writing is terrifying, because it's not for anyone else to see. It should never be published, but it's it's such a great, personal tool that I have my journal with me all the time. And it's ugly, it's a mess, but that's why I love it, because it helps me dive a little bit deeper.
And, one of the other things is we know that their generation may not be into pen, paper, journal. So if there's a notebook app or an app that they can take notes and jot down their thoughts and feelings, they're all about that. I've had a couple of athletes that love that, and I also know that they have their phones on them all the time. So that's an easy way for them to jot some thoughts down and some feelings down. That helps better communicate with everybody.
Yeah. Awesome.
Leon said, Rise made us understand it's not only about the sport, it's also about daughter's happiness and wellness. A happy athlete goes a long way. Every sport is a marathon, and Rise ensured Amber's happiness outside of the water.
That is so powerful.
That's powerful. Yeah.
It is, because sports end. I retired when I was 25, and I still have a lot longer, many years to go. So, sports end, but the happiness that, athletes find within the sport continues. So thank you for sharing that, Leon. That's great. Mark has a question.
Yeah.
And you guys can feel free to send your questions at any time. But Mark's question, is there a plan written out, including this writing and journaling for each athlete? And is it all customized for each athlete and their personality?
Great question. Yes.
Talking about the mentorship program.
Yes, absolutely. And something that would be urged, regardless of if it's a rise athlete or not, is everything should be according to how that person learns and what works for them. And so writing and journaling, one of the things about our specific program is that there are recommendations of how to do things, but everybody's different.
Yes.
Everybody's different. It doesn't matter what it is. Like I was saying, if it's a gigantic pen and paper and all these people are writing, or if the journal is an app, everyone's different. And that's just one example of everybody being different. And so there's different learners. Kinesthetic, verbal, auditory, there's different learners. And so learning that style happens by connection. It happens with the mentors to the athletes. It happens with coach to athlete. It happens with parent to athlete. Learning how that person learns is so key. And you can take a bunch of tests. You can do all of that. That's fantastic. But I think the best way to do it, again, is communication and connection. Like just asking and observing how they learn and what they do well. And it takes some time.
Yeah.
It takes some time.
Yeah. Yeah, and as for, to answer that question, so yes, it is customized because we are clearly very strong believers in each person having their own process, their own path, their own journey. And the cool thing too is, we started Rise almost 3 years ago now, and it started as us being mentors, but now we have a team of almost 20 Olympians, and each one of them has their own individualized methods of, connecting with their athletes, and so that helps further customize that. We do have the general guidelines and exercises and tools, and each one gets to put their own spin on it, which is really cool. Yeah.
I think it's also something, they're in school, they have curriculums, and the more individualized they can feel and the more important they can feel doing something that works for them is very empowering, which is the baseline of everything we do, is that empowerment.
Yes.
Hi, Tomas. Awesome. Oh, and Jerry doing great.
Yeah, awesome. Should we jump to one of our other questions that was written in from the Facebook parent page earlier? All right. As a parent with absolutely no athletic ability, don't sell yourself short, whoever wrote this, I worry about the choices she makes in swim and in real life. Also, how my input affects her decision making. Oh, that's a good question. Am I being pushy? That's a good question, because a lot of times, even if you're saying the right things, you're asking the right questions just by asking them. I remember when I was a kid, when my dad said sit up straight, I slouched.
You do the opposite.
You do the opposite. So am I being pushy? Ooh, that's a great question.
That is a great question. I'll go for it.
Yeah, you go for it.
Going back to what we said earlier too, it doesn't matter if you played the trombone and your athlete or your child is a field goal kicker for whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just that amount of support. So definitely don't sell yourself short. You don't have to know the tools of that specific sport or have been an athlete to support your athlete. It's all about saying and communicating, I support you and what you're doing is interesting to me. And I will say the element of learning what they're doing and empowering them to teach you is huge. So I remember growing up, my dad was a swimmer, but my mom was not. She played tennis. My mom had zero swimming interest, or she is interested, but she was like, cool, So, but at the end of the day, she'd pick us up from practice, and it was more, again, question asking, like, how was it? Who did you talk to today at practice? Tell me more. Oh, tell me about that. And at the time, I was annoyed. There were times when I was annoyed and I didn't want to answer that. But however, thinking back to those moments, even providing that empowerment or that feeling of empowerment within myself to her, yeah, we did this and this is how you do this. And this is how it, it kind of makes you feel like you're in control and you can teach them something. So I think that that's a way that you can not feel pushy, is if you ask those questions and support what she's doing and continue to have her teach you about what she's doing.
Yes. Love that. That's great.
Teaching goes both ways, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's good to, at least as far as it is with, the choices that they're making, let's say at practice, and are they working on these specific techniques and all that, is also, trusting that they are working hard. you know, at least from the perspective of the kids that I work with, they all work so hard. They're already so hard on themselves for messing up a technique or doing something incorrectly. And then I've had stories where even out of good intention, the parent asks about their thing, it just triggers their already overdriven self, you know, criticism. And all of a sudden there's a conflict, even though the parent's best interest was simply like, you know, like, are you doing this thing? And all of a sudden it's like a blow up. But so, you know, trusting that they're already, you know, they have their coaches that are pushing them to work on those techniques, and they, you know, and, you know, it's pretty much a lose-lose when we try to get into coaching the parent, with parents coaching on things that, you know, you said your mom was not that familiar with swimming. My parents were not that familiar. Whenever my dad said something about swimming, I would pretty much just say, roll my eyes and say, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. But, you know, the coaches have my back for that. And I don't know, what about just general decisions, daily life decisions? Are they eating healthy enough? Are they making choices? Are they staying up on their phone all night? How do we encourage them without getting them to resist?
So that's a great question, because let's be real, if you're a teenager, you're going to resist a little bit. Like, you know, and I mean, it's very rare that you don't. That's part of the evolution and developmental process of life. However, I have had success with a couple, and Stacy, this was one of your questions on our Facebook group. You know, you and Avery have done challenges together, like water drinking challenges. And I know Serena and Zyla have done water drinking challenges, or how many, you know, times you can write down this positive statement that day, or how many times you can think, you know, they have these like positive little wins together from mother to daughter. And I think a mother to daughter, I'm speaking mother to daughter, obviously, you know, dad to son can be something very different or whatever, but it's a way to connect and hold each other accountable without feeling that pressure. So as far as like healthy eating choices and early bedtimes and things of that nature, it's just continuing, in my opinion, to provide examples of why that is important without it being a mandatory, like, you have to listen to me kind of thing. Again, I'm not a parent. However, I'm just reflecting on my parents and what they would tell or do with me. It was more of a, if you go to bed early, you'll have more energy for this, and then you will have a better day tomorrow. You know, it's like providing examples of why that can be a positive thing to implement into your lifestyle. So I know that worked for me. I was like, oh, yeah. They're right, I guess.
Having fun with
positive,
it. It's always a good route to go.
Yeah.
We take things too seriously, don't we?
Yeah.
Like,
every day. I mean, we all do.
We're gonna bring that fun challenge in.
Bring some fun in.
Yeah.
You know, and Avery and Stacy were doing, they did those fun like water challenges and, you know, timing cleanup and chores and stuff, you know, but it creates a relationship. Yeah. And then which creates more support. Yeah. In other areas, it snowballs. So, great question. We're still learning too. So all of your thoughts, we would like. And I think that another thing that is interesting too is engaging in, if there's events with your athletes, if there's a speaker somewhere, or going to a motivational movie, or just things like that, I think are cool if they're interested and up to it. I think that's a good way to bond and create a positive atmosphere surrounding positivity. Or
even stuff online.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much going on these days.
Facebook Live. Awesome. Well, does anybody have any other questions on how you can best support your athletes, or examples of things that have worked for you guys with your athletes, or things you've seen work? That's cool. Oh, is there a possibility of bringing a mentor or you girls to the Bahamas? Sure thing. We would love, if you have any questions about anything regarding what else we can do at Rise, we are growing and expanding outwardly as well to the masses and to our community. So yeah, Bahamas. So if there's anything that you have question-wise, feel free to shoot us an email, and we'll provide that after as well. But
Yeah,
always
plus it's good to see what people are interested in.
Yeah.
We're an online community. We are based on, our video calls are via the internet. So you're sitting in your living room or wherever you are. So we are looking to get that not one-on-one, but that personal connection with our mentors all across wherever they are. So it's in the works. The Bahamas sound nice.
Yeah, the Bahamas sound great. We'll be there tomorrow. Just let us know what. We have another question. For an athlete jumping into a new sport, how can we best support the inevitable failures, hardships?
Yeah, keeping the growth mindset, and knowing from the beginning, just like when you start something new, you're going to have failures. You're going to have those things are inevitable. And, now as I'm, we're still new business owners. We are doing this Rise thing, and neither of us have MBAs, and we fail all the time. And it's easy to get caught up in those failures and consider them. It is a failure, end of story. But I think, what we've tried to do and hold each other accountable for as we hit one failure after another is to remember that each failure is simply a learning opportunity. With each thing that you stare at the computer not understanding what it's even saying, it's just another learning opportunity. And keeping them going through this failure and pulling out the things that they've learned from it, allowing them to learn from it, are all good parts of it. So it's life without a little failure.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. You can't have success without it. I know it's a cliche saying, but it's true. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Paul Greathouse, how do you help a swimmer bond with a new coach? Great question. I guess my initial thought would be, what's the relationship or the perception that the swimmer has with the coach? Or what's the communication with you and your athlete like about how to do that? And so I think it's asking questions about what do you feel that coach is going to help you with. And what are some of the things that you're already doing? Just being interested in the current situation happening with the new coach and asking questions, getting to know what the athlete feels regarding a new coach. Because that's scary.
Yeah, and
it's fun.
Encouraging them to remember that change is always hard. Even if it's the best coach in all the land, you're going to have some resistance. So if your conversation with them can always just encourage, like, it doesn't have to be perfect today. It's okay if you're a little frustrated, or if you feel like you're not getting enough attention from the coach, or whatever it is that their issue is, just keeping that space for keeping the conversation towards time being a necessary part. I know with any new coach transitions that I had in my swimming career, it took time. My last coaching change, it took me about almost a year to really trust him and to understand, where we were as a coach and athletes, and where I stood with all the other athletes and whatnot. So those things definitely take time. So ask questions and encourage them to understand that transition of any sort is a time-based process.
Yeah. And, I think we can get caught up in that change being something that would mess up performance. If there's already a performance, like if someone's already doing well, that like, oh no, like now I have this change, I have to like start all over, and like, but instead it's like, what's that coach good at doing? Are they good at motivating you? Are they like, what are they good at? So then that builds upon, okay, well, you've had success with that. Now this coach can get you even further with that, if that's something that, the discussion lends to. So it's again, that transition. And that's a good question.
Yeah, looping back to previous question from Debbie, if an athlete excels at 2 sports, how does a parent support their choices when they get conflicted about which one they should ultimately focus on? Great question.
I I had a little bit of experience with that, I suppose. My brother way more than I, but I think if a parent support their choices and they get conflicted about which one they should ultimately.
I think remembering it's the athlete's choice.
Yeah.
It's their choice, and maybe it's a chance for you to guide them through a decision-making process of weighing out the pros and cons, and maybe it's a good chance to practice letting go of something, because obviously if they're in two sports, it means they love two sports. So if they are forced to choose one, they're going to have to let go of something that they love. It's obviously a difficult decision, and there's a lot of emotions that go along with that, and helping to guide them through that process and seeing the, again, process of decision making, but then also later on, once they have made the decision and they're moving on and they say, oh, well, I miss that old sport and I miss all my teammates, that's a great time to, step in and remind them too of, this is just a process. It's, just because you left a sport doesn't mean that all those experiences are gone, doesn't mean that your friendships are gone or anything like that. It's just you've decided that this is where my future lies and let's put all into this sport. But maybe also questioning, is one sport necessary? Can they figure out a way to do both sports still? Unfortunately, not every single athlete becomes an Olympian. Not every single athlete becomes, an NBA star. So would they enjoy the experience better if they stayed in both sports and had a great experience, right? It doesn't only have to fit one path. And so-and-so picked just one sport instead of wasting their time with both. It's not necessarily a waste of time. There's a lot of questions to ask there.
And perhaps also asking the intention about it. It's like, what's the intention behind doing both? If you do both, is it just because it feels good to be able to do more than one, or is it because you genuinely love it, and getting to know the reasoning behind it so that the athlete doesn't get stressed out or overwhelmed and can still do their schoolwork and can still go to bed early and things like that. So just making sure that it's within a healthy balance growing up and not overdoing anything as well. I'm a big proponent of that. I think just making sure that they do have time to enjoy the other simple things in life as well, which is important, and friends and family and things like that too. Sheena
and Casey joined, and we have a question from Brenda. My swimmer works hard in practice, but last 6 months when it comes to meet, she just goes through the motions and doesn't actually race. Is there anything a parent can do to help motivate their swimmer to race every meet, not just when she feels like it?
That's a good question.
The conversation that I would probably have with the athlete, I being the mentor in this situation, not the parent, and maybe something that could guide you as far as how you would approach this conversation as well, is that, racing, so she sounds like a swimmer, my swimmer, and I know, Brenda, that you're in our program too, so I do know that her daughter is a swimmer, and so with swimming, it's an interesting sport where we practice 2 hours long and hard in the pool, but not necessarily racing. Racing is a totally different environment. All of a sudden, there's no one in your lane. You're out of the pool. You're on the blocks. You're, wearing a different suit and tighter goggles, and literally everything is different. There's people watching you, and so to be given the opportunity to race is something that I had to learn a lot later in my career, because I found myself stepping up on the blocks and wondering why it feels so different than it did in practice. And so now that I know that, I try to tell my athletes every opportunity that you have to race, you're practicing racing. Racing takes practice. Racing takes practice. So encouraging that it's not about just trying hard and seeing what happens, but it's, I need to build a routine around my race. I need to see how I feel, what are the best stretches that help me loosen up beforehand, and using every single race as an opportunity to practice racing. Not that you have to care about it. I came back from the Olympics after 2008 and had to go into college swimming, and that was great and it was fun, but I could care less about how I did at those meets after being at the Olympics. And And, it's totally a different experience for everybody, but there are times when you don't really care about the meet that you're at or the performance that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the biggest performance of your life, but it is still a chance to practice racing, practice competing, practice being in an environment that potentially pulls out some nerves from you, gives you anxiety, and so many more of those emotional things that we have to practice as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Racing's hard. You don't always want to do it either. And I think that's once understanding that happens to where it's not going to be something that, I mean, if an athlete is motivated to race every single time, that's almost not normal. Like you want to be able to have the ups and downs and highs and lows so that the athlete does appreciate to race. I know I went through a lot of lulls with wanting to race, and that's very normal. And I think that one of the things that my parents and coaches and role models would always ask me is, what's fun about this? Like, what are you having fun with? And if they're like, nothing, this is terrible, this is not fun at all, I don't want to race, I don't want to play this game, I don't want to do this match, it's okay. Just almost allowing space for that vent to happen. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that's almost more helpful than anything. It's just the athlete letting it all out and knowing that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be done or end. It's just this phase and figuring out what is it about that lack of motivation, like what is actually happening there. So just letting the athlete talk and vent if they're wanting to, of course.
Yeah. Great question.
And I think we had one more from Anthony had said up above, just a Michael Jordan quote about failing. That was great. It's always going to happen for sure. Mark asked a question above about our program. He said, how often can our kids meet with their mentor if they work in the mentor program? Which sounds so awesome, and I wish I did. Thanks, Mark. That's why Reb and I created this and to have a team, is because it's cool to have a role model. Weekly, 30 minutes a week, and 14 sessions, and then we take a small break and do 14 more sessions and continuously like that throughout the years. So it's weekly accountability.
Yeah, and that's the reason that we set it up that way is, maybe your athlete has attended a clinic in the swimming world or the equivalent in other sports, and they get that, one hit rush of like motivation from seeing this person, this Olympian, and what they've been through in the experiences, but that, come Monday morning, are they still going to have that with them? What about next week, Monday? So, that's really fun and exciting, but we wanted to actually create changes and help guide these athletes to making changes. And we've all heard that a change takes time. Yeah. Creating a new habit takes at least 30 days and all those sayings out there, but it's very true. And we wanted to create lasting change and create that together with the mentor. So we decided on this length of a season, just like we have seasons in our sports, and it helps us to really, work throughout the entire process of different phases of the athlete as they're just flat out training, they're preparing to start a new season, maybe they're preparing for competition season, going through it, and then wrapping it up too. There's different stuff happening at all times. Yeah. So we find that weekly, the weekly session fits well into their schedule. They come to rely on it as part of their, Monday routine or Tuesday routine, and it just becomes a normal part of their training process. 30 minutes is a great amount of time for a kid to stay focused.
It's a perfect amount of time.
And it's great to, catch up and be able to start opening up about, a lot of times they sit back and want us to lead the conversation, and that's great, but slowly over time they start to open up and say, well, you know what, I really want to talk about this because this happened and I don't really know what to do about it, or this is going on and I'm not sure what I think about it. So it's great. It's a great space to hold that connection.
It's really rewarding, and it teaches the mentors a lot as well. It's a great relationship to learn about the athlete, and it's empowering, I think, for everybody. And excuse me, Anthony said, what are some things that you would say to parents who are often more anxious about a race result than for themselves? I would say that's fair. I was more nervous for my sibling than I was for me. I was freaking out when I was watching him compete. So I think that's a very natural feeling, Anthony, to have, just so that you know. I would imagine that's anxiety ridden for sure.
Yeah, I would say try to hide it. Just from my own experience from my parents, when they would tell me later, oh, we were so nervous. I was like, really? I have no idea. Just because you don't want to be adding extra pressure to the athlete, as they are already likely putting pressure on themselves. We don't want them to feel like they have to perform in order to make you, the parents, happy. And, from the work that I've done and getting to know a lot of these athletes, they do want to please you. Even if they say or they don't care or they get mad or whatever, they're teenagers, but they want to please you. So I would say, show them excitement, but try to hide anxiety from them, at least in the beforehand. And after the race, it's more like, I was so excited for you. I was with you.
Yes. And if the athlete doesn't seem to be anxious or nervous or overly excited, sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that a lot of athletes are almost stoic before a competition or a game or a match or anything of that nature, because it's when you do get prepared. I just recall sometimes it was like, are you serious enough? Not necessarily from my parent, but from a coach or anybody. It was like, are you focused? Are you serious? You seem to be laughing. Why are you doing whatever? And it's like, well, actually, that's my way of preparing. And so also, again, just learning that may not necessarily be a bad thing. It's just everybody has their own coping mechanism with stress and nerves. And some athletes get that way as well. So I think if you're nervous, is just as far as feeding off of the athlete's energy, that's also natural, I would imagine. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Mark asked, what are the age ranges of kids that Rise works with? Is there such a thing as too young to start mentoring? So Rise works with athletes 13 and up. So 13 is our minimum, and we do so because we focus on the more challenging emotional, mental aspects of sport, and a lot of times it takes time to develop that emotional maturity and be able to ask and dig deeper. And so athletes 13 and up, that's pretty much high school based and above is our age range. So basically, I like to tell people when your athlete comes home one day and they're like, this isn't fun anymore, right? then that's a good time.
That's a normal teenage response. Teenagers.
Yes.
Good age.
So if you guys have any last minute questions, I know we wanted to keep this about an hour at the most, so we can begin wrapping up, but feel free to send any last minute questions here.
Oh yeah, no diaper dip. No swim lessons.
Not yet. Starting early.
Yes.
Yeah. So
any last minute questions, we're happy to answer it, and then we can shoot you guys some last minute details or info if you have any other.
Well, I know that this was a really fun hi Jack. This is a really fun way to communicate with you guys, and this is our first one, so any feedback is welcome, but also know that we're going to do this on a monthly basis, and centered around the parents and giving you guys a chance to ask your questions, to connect, to share stories, whatever it is. So feel free to also write into the Rise Parents Facebook page, and that'll give us a chance to get your questions answered on next month's live call.
So the format will be monthly Q&A call, and as Brad said, any questions you have, I'll post some of them before the call so that you guys can know what you're coming into the call asking. And so like she said, this is the first one, so some themes and everything, so we can start to get more of a routine. If you guys want to have a specific theme per call or questions surrounding that theme, all feedback welcome. We're starting this community and got to start somewhere. Sports. This is awesome. And this has been great. Like, these questions are fantastic. Really and great. Leon, thank you so much.
Thank you everyone who joined in. So I know we have a couple of exciting things to wrap up with.
Yes.
First, obviously, we have our new Facebook Parents page. What's the official name again? Rise Parents.
Rise It's Rise, a parent community.
Parent community.
We're going to call it that because it's for any youth athlete parent.
Yeah, so feel free to share it with your other, the other parents on your team. Again, you do not have to be enrolled in our program. This is just a community here to answer the questions and support each other. And this is a great way to see that you're not alone in what you're experiencing and whatnot. So in addition to the Facebook page, we have our website up and running, and there's an amazing parent ebook on that. The website is rise-athletes.com. You can check out that ebook there. It's beautiful. It has so much great information. And we also have a really fun new video out on YouTube, which you can scroll through our Instagram and find it there as well. Gives you a little peek at the lives of our mentors, who we are now, and what we do beyond our athletic former Olympic careers, but also how, why it is that we give back to our athletes. That was a really fun video to film. And shoot us any questions, comments, or emails at rise-athletes.com. That's our email address where you can reach us, connect, communicate, chat, and we look forward to connecting with you guys next month right here.
Yeah, and just so you know, this parent Facebook group is linked to this page. So it should be enlisted there in the page, and join on in, and we are happy to have you. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you guys next month. And you'll see the time for the call next month on our page. Just didn't want to leave you hanging there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time.